They're very important issues. They affect the constituency I represent hugely. In that sense, they relate to a motion that I wasn't allowed to move in July. And they're also very important nationally. So if we do them one by one, affordable housing, back in July, the chair of the Housing and Communities Board said that he wanted a new definition of affordable housing. Well, I'm not surprised, because the objective assessment of housing need document that he takes credit for now and is singing the praises of always has a different definition of affordable housing from the one in law. So my motion about affordable housing is very straightforward. What is affordable housing? What policies and strategies does government have do they have for affordable housing, and how are they being applied in practice to the various places around the island? And similarly with active travel and parking. Active travel, we used to have a strategy. It expired in 2021. It's assumed to still be in place when planning decisions are made, when funding decisions are made, when the transport strategy is coming forward to Tynwald to be received. It's assumed to be in place there. For instance, we're talking about 20-minute villages or 20-minute neighbourhoods, 15 minutes sometimes. We're talking about encouraging most people to walk from urban area place to another urban area place, it seems, in some documents I've seen. And we need to actually understand whether government is serious about that, and whether government does think that if 1 in 2 of us who live in urban areas will actually make active travel as our way of commuting. And with parking, I had thought, amongst others, that there had been a pledge that the new nurses' home, for instance, wouldn't have parking permits for residents because it was subject to this active travel 20-minute neighbourhood policy. But then the current minister contradicted that, the former minister, and said that they would have residents' parking permits. So these are some of the issues behind the 2 motions that I've got in my name.
In terms of the housing aspect there, you talk about the definition of affordable housing. Housing has been such a big topic all through this administration. Is it a bit surprising then that in the final year of this administration, that definition doesn't seem to be in place? Well,
it's in place in law. In the strategic plan, there's a thing called a Section 13 agreement, and they're defined very precisely as first-time buyers' houses and public sector housing offered by local authorities and the DUI. Mr Ashford included Ty Clegg, former nurses' home houses in affordable housing, where they've just gone to key workers who can afford the rents that are there. There are Department of Health and Social Care and Department of Education also offer houses with public subsidy to arriving members of staff. They formerly, back in Chris Robertshaw's day and subsequently, those would have been included in the affordable housing definition, which was defined as any house that had a public subsidy towards it. Yes, I find it incredibly surprising that I need to have this debate, and I'd be very disappointed if the response from government was not to have a report because everything was clear and they amended the motion just to say this is what we're doing. We'll see what happens next if they do that.
Is it quite a difficult thing to define, though? Because what will be affordable to one person isn't necessarily affordable to someone else.
You're right. So I gave one definition in terms of the Planning Act. Another one is about how much income there is in the house relative to the cost of rent. And then we get into if we include key worker and subsidies to incoming public sector workers, we've got another type. We're using it as part of the relocation attraction package. So you're completely right. We need to sort these things out. This is not an academic exercise. This is not a theoretical exercise. Manx Development Corporation is spending, or plans to spend, more than £50 million on the Westmoreland Village concept. I'm just creating that number based on the costs so far of the first 37 apartments as part of it. So they're spending £50 million. Douglas City Council, Ramsey Town Commissioners, Castletown Town Commissioners, Peel Town Commissioners and the other active players in the housing market dream of getting £50 million to pay for public sector housing. And people who want to get onto the housing ladder dream of having a scheme that enables them to get on the housing ladder when so much more could be done with that £50 million. And finally, many people, especially young people like yourself, end up I don't know your housing situation, but many young people end up in private rental accommodation, and that sort of money would go a long way to improving the quality and bringing more previously vacant homes back into use. So we absolutely need to know what we're doing with every pound of money that's spent on housing, and at the moment the vast majority of it's gone on the Westmoreland, or going on the Westmoreland Village scheme, and is that what the public wants?
You're asking essentially for this to be debated in January. Is that too late?
It'll be debated in October if we get to that motion. My opening speech will lay out what I'm expecting, and then so we've had our first debate, and I'm expecting a report to come back with any answers that are still missing by the end of October's debate in January.
So sorry, that's what I meant with the debating of the report in January. Any recommendations from that report, those findings? Is January soon enough to be tackling that?
Well, if you're asking me, have we wasted 4 years in terms of affordable housing, the answer is yes. The action plan for the Housing Communities Board was very good. The main author of it, yours truly, couldn't get a clear handle from ministers what they were trying to do in terms of housing. So I borrowed the Labour Party 1945 slogan of Homes for All, because that was all about private, public, urban regeneration. So that's what's in that document. It's still not clear to me what they're trying to do with their housing funds, and this debate is part of bringing that point out.
So on the active travel side of things then, you talk about the previous strategy having lapsed in 2021. Mm-hmm. There is significant mention of active travel in the transport strategy that's due to be debated at this month's sitting. Does that address the issues that you have raised with this motion?
Not at all. So when we get to the last page, the one describing the outcomes, it talks of most people preferring in urban areas to use active travel. The last census, I think it was about 15% of people actually walk to work. So there's a long way between 15% and most people. How we're going to do it is just completely not covered in that transport strategy, and there are many more gaps. For instance, Manx Utilities knows how to produce the amount of electricity that we need at the moment, but I would have thought Manx Utilities need from the transport strategy an idea about how many electric vehicles there will be, both in the bus fleet, the car fleet, and the private under private ownership, taxis as well, so that they can work out where they need to supply the electricity for another element of the transport strategy. So active travel is part of the transport strategy. It's deficient in respect of it, but the transport strategy is actually deficient in so many other areas as well.
You mentioned that the active travel strategy, the one that's lapsed, is essentially still being applied to planning applications today. Is that a concern then, that potentially a lapsed strategy is still being treated as it is active?
Very much so. And if you read the North and West Area Plan, which is one of the most important motions that's coming to Tynwald, this whole House of Keys, in the last 5 years, a hugely important document. It refers to lots and lots of strategies that have either lapsed or has not yet developed. So they refer to the energy strategy, which hasn't yet been costed, hasn't yet been funded. It refers to the affordable housing, which is still under discussion, it seems to me. It refers to active travel, as you suggested. It refers to a population already by 2026 being 93,500, and it's patently obvious we don't have a population of 93,500. It's more like 85,000. So I will be voting against the North and West Area Plan when it comes to Tynwald, and I just think the public needs to make sure that they know that each of their MHKs knows how to vote. I think this month it should be adjourned until next month, because it hasn't as yet had the attention it deserves. Ramsey Town Commissioners, I think, have been considered it under any other business. Peel Town Commissioners are just about to sending comments to MHKs, but I don't think the public really understands the full extent of the greenfields that are going to be taken over for new housing, when the government's stated policy is to encourage brownfield regeneration. So if you live in an urban area next to vacant properties, next to sites that need development, they won't happen, because it's much cheaper to build on a greenfield without any historical legacy to deal with than it is inside the middle of Ramsey or the middle of Peel or the middle of Douglas or any of the other sites that need tackling. So that's a very important debate. I'll be moving if nobody else does, that the debate is adjourned till November, unless already people have seen the light that we can't possibly make this wishful, optimistic, fanciful area plan for the north and west, which just assumes this, assumes that, because assumptions make an ass out of you and me, if that's not too provocative language to use.
You talked about it being the most important issue, really, for this House of Keys. Why?
Because it's about what the Isle of Man looks like as you're coming out of Peel. It's about affordable housing. It's about how we live, where we live, the nature of the houses. So there's an assumption in there that each hectare of land will only have X number of houses in it, but the X that's been quoted is much lower than the typical housing development on the other side of the water. So why wouldn't it then be changed to have more houses? So if you want an island where we leave the centres, many houses in the centres vacant and many sites, brownfield, and we extend into the fields around our islands, fine, vote for this north and west area plan. If you want a proper finalised energy strategy, affordable housing strategy, transport strategy, and all of the other realistic population estimates taken into account as we plan the future of the north and the west, don't vote for this north and west area plan. That's my message.
You mentioned that the plan references things that have lapsed, things that haven't been completed yet in terms of strategies, various policies. Mm-hmm. Is this indicative then of an issue that has taken too long to get to this stage, if the legislation that it's based on just isn't there or has lapsed already?
Yeah, it's not legislation, it's just policy. So, we've handled climate change completely wrongly. You had to believe in the issue of climate change, and then you were part of the team that was doing climate change. What we wanted practical initiatives. So if I give you an example from transport, because transport strategy is on there, we wanted to know what sort of vehicles people would drive, how the buses would be powered, and all of those things, so that the Manx Utilities Authority or the private sector could say there's going to be an extra number of megawatts of electricity demanded in this year, and this year plus 5, and this year plus 10, and then they could actually plan the energy delivery around that extra use, and that hasn't happened. So that's just one example, but I can repeat that all over the place. I mean, we can assume the population is going to grow to 100,000, or we can ask, is it realistic that the population is going to grow to 100,000 in the next 15 years? And if we assume it's going to grow, and then we zone land accordingly. If we zone land that's cheaper to develop, that will develop first, not the difficult land. And so therefore, given that the last election was all about urban regeneration and dealing with brownfield sites and filling up the 4,500 vacant properties that exist in our towns and villages, we should be doing what we set out to do 5 years ago, not changing the policy in the last year and just having a greenfield development rather than brownfield.
Now, this is the area plan for the north and west. Is your concern potentially, though, that this could be something that then is applied elsewhere on the island? No,
it will affect. Everybody said that the east needed more housing. The take-up of the planning opportunities in the east has been much slower than expected when the area plan for the east went through in 2020. So there are lots and lots of places still to be developed in the east. It's already beginning to come this way because Mr Hooper made a controversial planning appeal decision in Camlork, such that the plains of heaven, as they were called back in the day, will begin to have houses built over the green fields underneath them. So the North and West Area Plan has a huge impact in what happens next in the south and in the east, particularly through the mechanism of strategic reserves. And also the will of Tynwald has been thwarted through the North and West Area Plan. And in fact, the Cabinet Office government's position, as recently as February, has been overturned by Mr Ashford taking the North and West Plan to Tynwald in October. What I mean is that in February, Cabinet Office was submitting evidence against approval of the Camlork Trolleby Lane site because there was so much developable land, hectares and hectares of land that could have houses built on it that was already approved in principle for development. And all of a sudden, the inspectors come back and said, because there's such an ambitious North and West area plan based on an objective assessment of housing need, which isn't objective to any extent. It's just purely and simply, if we assume there's 100,000 people, this is how many houses they'll need. Basically, Mr Hooper's given planning permission under delegated authority for the Camlock development. So that's the first example of the impact from the North and West back into the East and everywhere else on the island.
Is this an issue that essentially comes back to housing developers, though? Is there something that stops them? Is there a reason why they seem to lean towards greenfield sites rather than brownfield?
Yeah, it's much cheaper to develop on greenfield sites. In fact, there was a very important moment when I was Minister of Infrastructure where I got invited, to all intents and purposes, to a built environment reform workshop in the Masonic, in Woodburn House, the Masonic Lodge in Douglas, February 2023. But as part of that meeting, I was supposed to meet, along with other ministers, the large developers in the Isle of Man. I declined to meet with large developers in a private room because I like to do things properly, and I could see where this was going. So what I'm suggesting is that if ministers did meet developers, and I believe they did, that's where we began to have the change. Look, we need houses. The easiest and the cheapest way to do it is to build over the green fields around Ramsey and Peel in particular, but also further north, to release the strategic reserves on the way up onto the mountain out of Douglas, all round Belafton in the south, through the Central Valley and odd places as you're going south from where I live, where the old pig farm was on the old Castletown Road. Lots and lots of sites, extending the towns with lots of new houses, rather than trying to do what we were trying to do, which is fill up vacant houses and derelict sites around the urban areas of the island.
In terms of the original motion, there has been a wording change since it was originally published on the Register of Business. It was originally talking about development briefs and master plans. I think the Minister has said in a written answer in the last week that that's been amended after concerns were raised by some members. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's the fudge that was put down up front for October motion is the fudge that was used to get the area plan for the east through back in October and November 2020. So essentially, it's quite ironic really how the timing's identical, but in October 2020, 1 year before the election, the area plan for the east was put down. It was then brought back to be voted on in November, and alongside the area plan for the east, there was a very sweet motion from Claire Christian and Jane Paul Wilson about how we would have community infrastructure levy. We would have to develop brownfield sites before we developed greenfield sites. We would set up a development corporation without saying what it was. All sorts of promises, and essentially Mr Ashford's first version of his motion had those promises up front, but they're meaningless because the ones back in 2020 weren't fulfilled. We've been let down. They were false promises, and why wouldn't people have said that so much in the debate about the promises that Mr Ashford first put down as a sweetener? I can only assume it was a deal arranged in the Council of Ministers, perhaps around Tim Crookall's forthcoming resignation at that point, or it was perhaps to get a couple of backbenchers on side. But look, every single member of the House of Keys and every member of the Legislative Council needs to accept that this is an incredibly important vote, and how they vote is going to determine how people live and what the island looks like and how the economy looks like going into the future. And we've got to be realistic. We can't basically assume things and then vote according to assumptions. So, for instance, there are probably people at the moment who are thinking for the North and West area plan that they're going to vote for it because more houses means more affordable houses. But when you juxtapose that with the fact that we don't even know what affordable houses are, and the former nurses' home apartments are hardly affordable to most people, we've got to take great care with transforming the vote. And I'll give you something very specific about Peel and Ramsey. In the new estates, in what's come to be known as New Peel, the affordable housing mostly is over 50s affordable housing. It's not young persons affordable housing. It's actually general purpose housing that the commissioners let to mostly to over 50 people. And then up in Ramsey, the last development's affordable housing, again, didn't go to the town commissioners for their list. Some properties are then made available to the commissioners to put some people in, but basically DOI has kept it for its future housing agency, and we should probably come back as a housing association in the future. So these are the sorts of issues that are going on. Affordable housing really matters, as does transport, and it all comes together inside the planning debate.
For someone who is waiting to get on the housing ladder, though, they'll think, OK, these are all potentially very valid concerns, but if this doesn't go through, does it all then go back to the beginning and it starts again? And does that just increase the amount of time before I can get on the housing ladder?
No, we've spent 13, 14 million probably on Tyclegg. That still leaves £37 million. We need to immediately apply that to Douglas's excellent 10-year housing strategy and the similar ones that I believe Ramsey and Peel and other housing authorities are developing. In terms of the first-time buyer schemes, that's been under review for 10 years. It was Mr Robert Shaw who launched that back in November 2013. The Chief Minister made the point that the income levels and the property levels need to be increased. That's a very good point. That takes money. There hasn't been any newer money applied to those schemes. Essentially, people in the past, when they've been selling their houses and sharing their profits with the government, they've been financing new people taking part in the scheme, and we need more new money in that scheme to enable people to start off. And we need to go back to some policies that have gone by the wayside over the years. So, for instance, the mid-rent pilot was cancelled by this government, but it's a really good pilot, and local authorities, pretty much without exception, that have houses want to introduce it for some of their properties. And we need to look again at the nature of tenancies, and we need to look again to bring vacant properties back into use. We need to look again at basically providing loans to people, either rent to buy or people who own houses, to make sure that they let them out so that all the properties that we currently have in the island are used. And there are some schemes that I'm sure are cheaper than the ones that are currently being put into place by this government. So every person who's frustrated in their home aspirations is important. We need to do better, and sadly this government's let them down.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.